We have 234 potential messages from aliens. Astronomers from a university in Quebec used a mathematical tool that hasn't really been studied in depth yet to analyze super quick light pulses of about less than a trillionth of a second to reach their conclusion. They also wrote a paper published in the publications of the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, where they went one by one ruling out other notions of where the pulses could be coming from. Some of those are instrument effects, rotation of molecules, rapid stellar pulsations, and peculiar chemistry. They say the best suggestion is lasers from advanced alien civilizations. The Stephen Hawking Project Breakthrough Listen is going to start investigating the 234 stars.
A Fourier transform analysis of 2.5 million spectra in the Sloan Digital Sky Survey was carried out to detect periodic spectral modulations. Signals having the same period were found in only 234 stars, overwhelmingly in the F to 2K1 spectral range. The signals cannot be caused by instrumental or data analysis effects because they are present in only a very small fraction of stars within a narrow spectral range, and because signal-to-noise ratio considerations predict that the signal should mostly be detected in the brightest objects. While this is not the case, we consider several possibilities, such as rotational transitions in molecules, rapid pulsations, Fourier transform of spectral lines, and signals generated by extraterrestrial intelligence ETI. They cannot be generated by molecules or rapid pulsations. It is highly unlikely that they come from the Fourier transform of spectral lines because too many strong lines located at nearly periodic frequencies are needed. Finally, we consider the possibility, predicted in the previous published paper, that the signals are caused by light pulses generated by extraterrestrial intelligence to make us aware of their existence. We find that the detected signals have exactly the shape of an ETI signal predicted in the previous publication and are therefore in agreement with this hypothesis. The fact that they are only found in a very small fraction of stars within a narrow spectral range centered near the spectral type of the Sun is also in agreement with the ETI hypothesis. However, at this stage, this hypothesis needs to be confirmed with further work. Although unlikely, there is also a possibility that the signals are due to highly peculiar chemical compositions in a small fraction of galactic halo stars. A Fourier transform analysis of 2.5 million spectra in the data release 8 of the Sloan Digital Sky Survey SDSS and the segue to SDSS was carried out to detect periodic modulations contained in their frequency spectra year 2012. The original motivation was to search for the periodic modulation caused by intensity pulses having short time separations or 2010. These pulses could be generated by ultra-rapidly varying objects or other exotic sources. Bohr 2010 carried out a theoretical analysis that shows that objects that emit intensity pulses separated by constant times shorter than 10 to 10 seconds generate periodic spectral modulations that are detectable in astronomical spectrum. Note that the modulation is periodic in frequency units but not in wavelength units. The theoretical analysis of Bohr 2010 is supported by experiments carried out by Chin et al. 1992. Searches for extraterrestrial intelligence SETI have been carried out since the first published suggestion by Kotkanian and Morrison 1959. Tartar 2001 discusses the history of SETI including physical and sociological issues. There currently are searches being carried out with radio and optical telescopes. For example, Kurapila et al. 2011 discussed the UC Berkeley SETI project. Bohr 2012 suggested that extraterrestrial intelligence ETI could send pairs of light pulses separated by a constant time interval to generate periodic spectral modulations. ETI would use these signals to make us aware of their existence and send us messages. The present article discusses some of the results of the Fourier transform analysis of SDSS spectra that found the type of periodic spectral modulation predicted by Bohr 2010 in a small number of stars that are all within a narrow spectral range centered near the spectral type of the Sun. We shall consider 5 possible physical causes of the spectral modulation: instrumental and data reduction effects, rotational transitions in molecules, the Fourier transform of spectral lines, rapid pulsations, and finally the ETI signal predicted by Bohr 2012. We shall now consider the possibility that the signals are generated by extraterrestrial intelligence ETI following the suggestion in Bohr 2012. Bohr 2012 uses computer simulations to create a spectrum having a modulation, periodic in frequency units, generated by pairs of pulses separated by a constant value of time t equals 1014 seconds. Figure 5 in BOR 2012 shows a computer-generated frequency spectrum that contains such a signal, and Figure 6 in BOR 2012 shows the Fourier transform of this spectrum. Like in our case, the signal is not visible in the noisy frequency spectrum Figure 5 in BOR 2012, while it is clearly visible in its Fourier spectrum Figure 6 in BOR 2012. The detected signals therefore have exactly the characteristics of the signals predicted by BOR 2012. In particular, the fact that the detected Fourier signals have a very narrow width, within the sampling limit of the E50, indicates that the spectral modulation is present in most of the spectral range of the ESDSS spectrum, and we can assume that it even goes beyond. BOR 2012 also shows spectra that have a strong spectral modulation visible in the spectra themselves, e.g. Figure 4 in BOR 2012, and one may wonder why ETI does not send such a strong signal, particularly if one considers that ETI is very likely to have a far more advanced technology than we are, and consequently to have extremely powerful sources. BOR 2012. There may be several reasons. Firstly, sending a stronger signal requires more energy, which has obvious inconveniences, particularly if one considers signals sent to a very large number of stars. Furthermore, ETI obviously knows that Fourier transforms exist and can detect weak signals, like we did. Finally, ETI knows that very technologically advanced civilizations can have powerful telescopes that can therefore detect weak signals. We can understand this last statement by considering how telescopes have evolved on Earth over the last century and will certainly improve considerably over the next centuries. In the more distant future, there is the possibility of having extremely powerful telescopes. For example, Angel et al. 2008 considered the possibility of a 100 m diameter mirror on the Moon. In Section 4 we state that the signals contain a few times 10 to 5 of the energy in the spectrum. Prima facie, this seems like a very large value, since one would intuitively assume that it is a few times 10 to 5 of the total energy emitted by the star. However, this is only the fraction detected by us. ETI would probably send it in a very small beam aimed at particular stars, so that the energy actually emitted would be a considerably smaller fraction of 10 to 5 of the energy of the star. For example, Howard et al. 2004, who discuss searches of nanosecond optical pulses from nearby solar stars generated by ETI, consider signals generated with a laser and emitted in a beam having a 20 milliarcseconds diameter. Section 3 in BOR 2012 discusses in more details the physical considerations of an ETI signal. The analysis at the end of Section 4, that discusses instrumental and data reduction effects, estimates that the fraction of signals detected is consistent with a signal coming from approximately 1% of the stars in the F2K1 spectral range. This analysis makes the assumption that all the spectra have a signal having the same intensity. This assumption is valid in the case of instrumental and data reduction effects, but not in the case of signal originating from ETI. The effect of signals having varying intensities would simply add noise to the continuous line in Figure 22. In the case of the ETI hypothesis, we would expect ETI to generate a signal significantly above the contribution of the stellar background, within the narrow beam, to facilitate its detection. This is the kind of signal that generated the continuous line in Figure 22, which fits well the data, where we assume that there is a signal significantly stronger than the signal used in computing the continuous in Figure 21, which does not fit the data. The fact that only a small fraction of stars, in a narrow spectral range centered near the spectral type of the Sun, has the signal is in agreement with the ETI hypothesis, since we intuitively would expect that solar-type stars would have ETI and only a small fraction of them would have ETI. After carrying out a Fourier analysis of 2.5 million spectra in the SDSS survey, we have found signals indicating a periodic modulation in the spectrum of a very small number of stars that are all within a small spectral range centered near the spectral type of the Sun. It was not found in any of the spectra of quasars and galaxies. We considered several possible effects that could cause the signals. Instrumental or data analysis effects could cause the spectral modulation. However, this hypothesis is not valid because of three main reasons. See Section 4. Firstly, the signal generated by instrumental or data analysis effects should be present in the spectra of all the quasars, stars and galaxies, while it is present in only a very small fraction of F and G stars and none in galaxies. Secondly, Signals should mostly be detected in the brightest stars because of signal-to-noise ratio considerations, while we find that this is not the case. Thirdly, and most importantly, the periodic spectral modulation signal was only detected in a very small number of stars that are contained within a narrow range of spectral types F2 to K1. As discussed in Section 4, the probability that this is due to random fluctuations is less than 10 to 16 for the results from the Segway-2 data and is also very small for the results from the Data Release 8 SDSS data. Finally, we find that the detections do not occur preferentially in some fibers nor at particular Julian dates as might be the case for some type of instrumental effects. The detections occur within large time spans and therefore cannot be due to occasional instrumental problems, e.g. caused by instrumental changes. Note also that we cannot invoke a hypothetical instrumental color effect to explain the fact that all the detections are within a narrow spectral range, because the signal was not detected in any of the galaxies that have spectra with similar mean signal-to-noise ratios, while most galaxies have colors within that spectral range. We cannot assume that this lack of detection is due to the extendedness of the galaxies because the SDSS spectra are obtained with optical fibers that have a diameter of 3 arcseconds, comparable to the broadening caused by atmospheric thinning in stars. The Fourier transform of spectral features is another possible source of the Fourier signal. However, a quantitative analysis that uses computer simulations shows that it is highly unlikely because several hundreds of strong lines placed at nearly periodic frequency locations would be needed. The fact that, as discussed in Section 5.2, the strengths of the signals are contained within a relatively small range of strengths and are present in only 1% of the stars in a narrow spectral range also makes it unlikely, since one would expect the lines to be present in all the stars in a given spectral type, e.g. G2, and have a wide range of strengths in the F2 to K1 spectral range. We considered effects that might change the shapes and locations of the spectral lines and therefore the strength and location of the signal coming from the Fourier transform of the lines. Assuming that the signals come from the Fourier transform of spectral lines, these strength and location variations might be responsible for the small fraction of detections given by the black dots in figures 21, 22 and 25. The effects could come from differences in chemical composition, effective temperature, gravity, rotational velocities, turbulence and radial velocities. The modeling carried out in Section 6 shows that a hypothetical effect would have to cause a signal weakening that increases very rapidly with the increase of the effect. We find that radial velocity is the only relevant effect, since computer simulations show that increasing radial velocities decreases the strength of the signal. However, radial velocities considerably larger than 300 km/s in 99% of the stars in the halo of the galaxy are needed to give the significant effect. This cannot be the case because the overwhelming majority of the stars come from the SDSS Segway-1 and Segway-2 survey, which targeted faint stars in the stellar halo of the galaxy. The overwhelming majority of these stars have radial velocities smaller than 300 km/s. We considered the possibility that the spectra of molecules generate the signal, concluding that the hypothesis does not hold. Finally, we considered the possibility that the signals are caused by intensity pulses generated by extraterrestrial intelligence (ETI) as suggested by Bohr 2012 to make us aware of their existence. The shape of the detected signals has exactly the shape predicted by Bohr 2012. The ETI hypothesis is strengthened by the fact that the signals are found in stars having spectral types within a narrow spectral range centered near the G2 spectral type of the Sun. Intuitively, we would expect stars having a spectral type similar to the Sun to be more likely to have planets capable of having ETI. This is a complex and highly speculative issue. See Lambert et al. 2009, and we shall not delve on it. Let us however know that all of the active optical SETI observational projects listed in Target 2001 search for signals in solar-type stars. Raines and Marcy 2002 and Howard et al. 2004 searched for signals generated by lasers in nearby solar stars. In particular, let us note that Howard et al. 2004 searched for nanosecond optical pulses from nearby solar stars. The ETI hypothesis requires that all different ETI transmitters choose to broadcast with the same time separation of pulses, and one may wonder why they do so. This is a highly speculative issue that may have several explanations. A possible explanation that makes sense is that all ETI use the same time separation to make it clear that the pulses all come from ETI. At first sight, one may question the validity of the ETI hypothesis because of the energy required to send the pulses to distant stars. The energy issue is discussed in Bohr 2012 that shows that technology presently available on Earth could be used to send signals having the energy needed to be detected 1,000 light-years away. Obviously, more advanced civilizations would have technologies capable to generate much stronger signals. Bohr 2012 elaborates on this. As an illustration of this, just imagine how the suggestion made by Bohr 2012 would have been considered if submitted in 1950, before the invention of the laser, when it would have suggested the use of a light bulb to send the signal. At this stage, the ETI generation of the spectral modulation is a hypothesis that needs to be confirmed with further work. This can be done by repeatedly observing the stars in tables 1 and 2 with photoelectric detectors capable of detecting very rapid intensity signals. However, ETI may not necessarily send us pulses at all times, so that the lack of detections in some stars may not necessarily signify that ETI does not exist. The reason why ETI may not send pulses at all times may simply come from the fact that the signals must be sent to a very large number of stars, so that too much energy would be required to send pulses to all stars at all times. The kind of signal that we have detected can be generated by pairs of pulses that have the same time separation t, but with the pairs sent with time separations significantly larger than t. Bohr 2012. One could therefore look for the ETI pulses using techniques similar to the one described in Lee et al. 2013, because pairs of pulses separated by a constant value of t equals 1.6465 to 13 seconds could be sent with a periodicity having a period much larger than t, e.g. 10 to 6 seconds. Lee et al. 2013 estimate that a telescope having a 1.7 mm diameter could detect signals from a G to V star 500 light distance, so that this type of signal could be detected in stars to distances as large as 2,000 light with existing telescopes. However, the detected stars in tables 1 and 2 are at distances greater than 8,000 light, so that a 30 mm telescope would be needed to observe the stars listed in tables 1 and 2. One could however carry out Fourier transforms on spectra of nearby stars to search for periodic signals and then observe detected stars with the technique of Lee et al. 2013 and smaller telescopes. Finally, note that the larger time separations between the pairs of pulses separated by the same t equals 1.6465 to 13 seconds do not have to be periodic. The pairs could be sent at random or with time separations modulated that will, provided the time separation t between the pairs remains constant. Consequently, ETI may add more information in the signals by sending pairs of pulses separated by the same constant time t equals 16,465 to 13 seconds, but with the pairs sent in a Morse-like code to send us messages or perhaps even pictures of themselves. The objects listed in tables 1 and 2 should also be observed with large telescopes to obtain spectra with high resolutions and high signal-to-noise ratios that would allow studying the signals in greater details to definitely confirm that they are not data reduction or instrumental effects.